you need to trust your intuition. If that's the case, if you got to go through somebody's phone, I mean, come on. If you gotta check somebody's location to see if they are at where they told you they were going to be at. I mean, what are we doing? We're grown adults here. We shouldn't have to be tracking people's location, checking their phones, checking their DMs, WhatsApps, whatever, however you do it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of Flip That Switch. I'm your boy B to this is Naive. We back with another episode. If you didn't get a chance to go watch the previous episode, please go back and watch it. As a matter of fact, before you watch this one, you want to go back and watch the previous one. Actually, just go back and watch all the previous ones. But today, we're going to be diving into a new topic, and I'm going to be talking about you may just be with the wrong one. Ooh, yeah, we about to get real juicy. How do you know you're with the right one, and how do you know you're with the wrong one? And so what I want to do in this episode is I want to kind of give a couple of signs that you may be with the wrong individual from a woman's perspective as well as from a man's perspective. Because often when we're in our relationships, we see the red flags, they're there, but we just choose for some reason to ignore them. And then one red flag turns into two red flags. The next thing you know, you so fully engulfed in what's going on, it's hard for you to get out. Maybe it's a comfortability thing. Maybe it's one of those things where, y'all got so much together, like businesses, kids, homes, things of that nature. And it's just hard for you to get out. But the quicker you can see those red flags, the quicker you can take heed to those red flags and try to get out as quickly as you can. Because, I've always been told that when somebody shows you who they truly are, you believe them. When you get in a relationship, people are going to bring their representatives. They're going to make it seem like they're the perfect person for the first few months. They're going to do everything they can to put a smile on your face, make you happy, make you laugh. And you're going to think this is the perfect person. This goes for men and women, not just, mostly for the men, mostly for the women, but there are women out there, obviously, that also bring a representative as well. Their intentions are made to be innocent and from the heart and pure at first, but then, there's always a motive at the end. And so if you can see those red flags early and get in front of them and just really put yourself in a position where it's not too late to get out. It's never too late to get out, but the more and more you get in it, the more and more it's harder. The more and more your heart's in it. And it's like you really just truly are. It's an internal battle to figure out whether you want to stay or go, So I just wanted to give a couple of red flags for the men as well as for the women. So these are signs that, and of course, look, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed, but I've lived life long enough to understand and realize that there are times in life and there are things in life where there's certain things that people do, there's certain things that people say, and people show you themselves to be who they truly are. And when you see that, you need to recognize that. And because we have standards, because we are wonderfully and fearfully made, because we ought to value ourselves, and because we ought to have self-esteem and confidence, we should be able to see those red flags and be like, you know what, I want a better standard of life for myself. I want to be with someone that I know God has fashioned for me, that I don't have to go through this with. In relationships, you're going to go through ups and downs and highs and lows, but you shouldn't be miserable all the time, And if you're miserable all the time, then that's a sign that God is telling you, okay, this ain't for you, So I'm just going to go through a couple of things here. I'm going to start with the women first, and then we'll go to the men. But these are a couple of signs that you should just be looking for, okay? So the first sign is you're constantly complaining about the person. Women, if you are constantly complaining about this dude, maybe you on the phone with your friends or your family, and it's just nothing but a vent session every single time you talk to them, maybe that's a sign that this isn't for you. In relationships, like I said, there's ups and downs, but the highs ought to outweigh the lows. The good should outweigh the bad. There should be times where maybe, a situation happened and you want to vent to someone as an outlet to see what they would do in this situation. Okay, cool. But if every single time you get on the phone with your friends and family, it's a vent session, then that may not be for you. Because the more and more you vent, the more and more you complain, the more and more miserable you're going to get. And then when you get miserable, now you've checked out. At some point, you're going to check out. And that's not good for you or your partner. Because what happens is when you check out, that's when you start entertaining other things. And I'm not saying cheating or anything like that, but you don't prioritize the relationship anymore because you realize that that relationship is toxic. And I mean, for lack of a better term, when you check out, the relationship is dead anyway. So if you're constantly complaining and venting, get out in front of that, reevaluate that relationship before it gets worse. Second sign I would say is, like I talked about earlier, red flags, you're ignoring them. Don't ignore the red flags. If you have a certain standard for yourself and you know that there are zero tolerance things that that you have a zero tolerance for, and that person is displaying those things, you have to see them for what they are. And if you see them for what they are, then you can get out in front of it and be like, you know what? Maybe the first time it's a conversation to be had. But if it keeps continuing on, you have to really look out for yourself, because at the end of the day, the one thing that's going to matter most is you and your mental. And so I would say, don't ignore the red flags. They're showing you the red flags, believe them, take heed to them, and get out in front of those. Third sign I would say, ladies, is the person is not adding value, but subtracting from you and bleeding you dry. When someone comes into your life, they ought to make you better. They ought to challenge you to be better. They ought to motivate you and encourage you to be better. And if there's a dream or a vision or goal that you have that you want to share with somebody, they ought to be the ones encouraging you to go after it, to attack that, to go after what you want, be the best version of yourself you can be. Someone's not doing that, they're not adding value to your situation, then that's not the relationship for you. They're subtracting from you, they're bleeding you dry. If they're not being your peace, we live in a world where, a dark, dark world where, you go through a full day and you just come home and you're drained and, mentally you're just not there. Maybe had a rough day, and then you come home and that person makes it even worse. They're bleeding you dry. You're already bleeding, right? But they're sucking the rest out of you, whatever they can get out of you to bleed you dry, and they're subtracting from you. That's not what it's supposed to be. When you're having a rough day, a bad day, you're supposed to come home and that person's supposed to be your peace. And you look, in a perfect world, that would be the ideal situation every single day, but it's not going to be, right. There's going to be times where you come home, you're going through something, that person comes home and they're going through something. So who's going to be there for who? Or maybe times where y'all are not aligned and, an argument may ensue or something like that. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about consistently coming home and your significant other not being your peace. That's not good. That's not good. You need somebody that's adding value to your life, that's going to help you, that's going to help cheer you up, that's going to put a smile on your face when you're going through something. The person that's going to be there to just really have your back, and you go to bed at night like, wow, I'm really truly blessed to have this person. They really helped me out in my time of need, or they really, were there for me when I was down and out, when I was in the trenches. You need somebody that's going to add value to your life. Another sign is you can't trust them. Ladies, if you can't trust them, that's the one good thing about women is they have a great intuition. They have an intuition better than men do. And I admire that about women. They just have this intuition. Like if they sense something, then more than likely is something happening. Now, what I will say by that is there's a difference between having an intuition and coming into a relationship with baggage, where maybe the last individual did something to you, and so now you don't trust this person. That's not what I'm talking about. If you have baggage coming into this relationship, you need to heal first before you enter into the relationship, because there are good men out there. There are men that are doing what they're supposed to do, being faithful, being loyal, putting you first, honoring you for the queen that you are. And yet, because 2 relationships ago, the guy cheated on you, now all of a sudden you don't trust this guy. Your guard is up. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about men who are just showing you, and it's right there on their forehead without a shadow of a doubt that they doing something that they ain't got no business doing. You need to trust your intuition. If that's the case, if you got to go through somebody's phone, I mean, come on. If you gotta check somebody's location to see if they are at where they told you they were going to be at. I mean, what are we doing? We're grown adults here. We shouldn't have to be tracking people's location, checking their phones, checking their DMs, WhatsApps, whatever, however you do it. Like, we shouldn't be at that point. Now, again, if it's written all over the forehead, you take heed to it. And that's a sign that you cannot be in that relationship, because the number one thing in a relationship is loyalty and trust. And if I can't trust you, then I shouldn't be with you. I said earlier, women don't settle. Otherwise you'll look up 5-6 years and 5-6 years have passed and you in the same situation and it's not getting any better. Maybe you've gone to counseling, therapy. It's not getting any better. You have exhausted all resources that you could. You tried to make it work. You're trying to be the best you can be, and it's just not working out. Then maybe it's time for you to just cut your losses. A lot of people desire to be in relationships and desire to be loved and wanted, and they want the companionship, and they see the ideal picture of what a relationship looks like on social media. And so they want that. But that doesn't mean you have to settle. What you need to be doing is you need to be really praying about the man that you want. You need to be praying to God to send you the man that's for you. And in the meantime, you wait. You embrace your singleness. You hold off. Because unfortunately, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but when you get desperate, that's when you make bad decisions. When you want something so bad that you're letting things just get in the way of what you truly should be desiring, what truly is meant for you. And so don't ever put yourself in a situation where you want love so bad that you'll accept just a piece of a man, or you'll accept just anything, because at the end of the day, at least you have someone there. It's not meant for you to just have a piece of a man. It's meant for a man to fully give himself to you, and for you to fully give yourself to a man. That's what a committed relationship really is about. And if God sends you that person, then that's what it's going to really be about. They're going to add value. It's going to be a situation where you're going to look up and you're going to be like, wow, I'm really getting treated like the queen that I'm supposed to. Wow, this man's really loyal and faithful. Wow, he really prioritizes me. Wow, even in his busy schedule, he really makes time for me. He really makes time to be like, you know what? I'm taking you on a date. Let's go here. I'm going to pick you up at this time. Wow, he's really intentional about me. I am the focal point. If you're not the focal point in your relationship, then that is a problem. And that's something that you need to really reevaluate. All right, so now I'm gonna go to the men. Y'all ready, men? Yeah, you see. Look, here's the thing. You knew I was gonna come down y'all lane too. Look, it ain't just for the ladies; it's just for the men too. But I want everybody to have a understanding on how this thing works. This is dating. These are committed relationships. This is marriage. So again, even though I'm not licensed or anything, I can kind of give you, based off of my experience, that what it kind of should look like. And look, I've been married before. It didn't work out. And so there are things that I took away from that I could have been better at, that I brought into my next situation. But before I did it, I stayed single for a long time because I had to heal. I had to kind of figure out who I was as an individual, figure out who I am as a man, figure out the man that God really wants me to be, and make sure I'm ready and in a position to where when it's time to do it all over again, then I'm great. And I'll always looked at myself as the married individual, the father, having kids, just based off of my story and my journey. I always wanted to be a family man. And so, like, I knew it would come around again, and I prayed that it would. And so, when the opportunity presented itself again with Destiny, I was like, okay, I'm better. I've healed. I'm correcting the necessary things that I need to correct. And by no means am I perfect. I am not perfect at at by no stretch of the imagination. I'm not. But I understand and recognize that, some of them things that led to the downfall of my first marriage, I can kind of take a look in the mirror and analyze and be like, okay, you know what? These are some things that I can correct to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself in these certain areas. And like I said, are you going to be 100% perfect? No, but you can gain traction. You can take baby steps to correct the things that you played a vital role in. And that's the thing about it. Like, there are things, if you're a mature individual, right? If you're a mature individual, let's say you're in a relationship and it doesn't work out, or you're in a marriage and it doesn't work out, you get a divorce. There are things that that you could have done a little bit better. Ultimately, it could have been the other person that caused you to be like, you know what, I can't be in this no more. However, it's very unlikely that it was 100% one way situation. In some cases, there is. Maybe there is. Maybe you were great and you were a great partner and the other person was just trash. Okay, cool. But more than likely, you played a little bit of a role and a part in what happened as well. So when you start to look at those things, then you can start to say, okay, you know what? Maybe my patience was just way too thin in that situation. Let me work on my patience. Let me work on, praying to God to give me more patience, better patience, not be so quick to want to throw in the towel when things go wrong. And you can kind of work on that, So, there's things that you can correct in the interim to make sure that you're better prepared. All right, men. Okay, I'll say this last thing. This is I'm on the lady side on this one because this is something that we've kind of went back and forth. I've went back and forth with this on people, but man, at some point you gotta start being honest with yourself, man. You know that this woman isn't for you. You know you don't want to be with this woman, and if you don't, that's cool. But stop playing the games. Stop leading her on. Stop playing games. Stop trying to be, oh, well, maybe there'll be a light at the end of the tunnel. No, no, you don't want to be with her. Maybe you want to play in the field. Maybe you want to be single. Maybe you have a certain preference. You have, maybe she ain't physically what you would want. Which, I mean, let's be real, it shouldn't be all about looks, but hey, I get it. There are men out there, it's about looks for them. They, physical attraction. I get it. But if that's the case, stop playing games with her. For real. Like, stop leading her on. Stop selling her a dream. Stop making it seem like y'all gonna be together, y'all gonna get married when deep down you don't have any intentions to marry this girl. You here for a fun time. And that's pretty much what it boils down to. Stop playing games. Let them know up front, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. You cool, but I'm not really looking for a relationship. I don't see us on that level. If you want to still hang out, fine, but I'm just letting you know, like, we're not going to be on that level. And in that way, she can make a decision for herself. Some women would be like, okay, cool, I'm looking for a relationship. So thank you so much for being honest with me and mature about the situation. But I'm going to go my separate way. Some women would be like, well, you know what? You're cool. So maybe we can just hang out as friends, no feelings attached, whatever. But you have to really be honest with them, and then you put the ball in their court. Because if a woman feels like you're trying to be intentional about her and go down that path, she's gonna entertain. She might be moving a little bit faster than you, but she's moving intentionally with the understanding of, okay, he's wanting to get married and have kids. I got a biological clock, so I'm going to move in a direction and I think he's moving in. But the problem is y'all are on two different channels, two different wavelengths. And you gotta really be honest with the ladies and tell them, look, if this is not something that you're looking for, just be honest. It's too many women out here. It's too many men out here for you to be leading people on and selling them a dream. And you know dang on well you don't have any plans or purposes to be with them, and you are doing yourself and her a disservice by leading her on. You know, it really falls on us as men to let the women know that we don't want the relationship or we're not going to take it any further. It falls on us. We control the environment. We control what happens. And I'm not saying that in a narcissistic, cocky, or arrogant way. I'm just saying we control it because if we're out here selling a woman a dream, remember, the man pursues the woman, right? He who findeth a wife findeth a good thing. So we are the pursuers, right? So if we're pursuing a woman, it falls on us to let them know, hey, this just ain't for me. So I want you really to think about that, man, and really just be honest with yourself and be honest with her. All right. So for the men, here's some things you need to think about. I mean, this first one is pretty easy. I mean, if you're unhappy in a relationship, you've had a conversation with her and, she's just not making you happy. She's not fulfilling the expectations that you have. She's not doing what she needs to do as a partner, not the nurturing or not motivating you, not, encouraging you to be better, to go out here and be better as a man. She's not being the helpmate that she is designed to be, then you might need to rethink that relationship. Now, I'm not talking about marriage. Marriage is a totally different situation. I'm just literally talking about dating and relationships as far as boyfriend and girlfriend. Marriage is a whole different ballgame because you committed to her, you married her, you knew that this wasn't happening. Maybe you thought marriage would change things. Marriage does not change things. Marriage only enhances what the underlying problem already is. Because now you go from seeing her and dating her to now you're living with her. You're seeing her every day. You're interacting with her every day. When you a boyfriend and girlfriend, you don't have to see that person every day. Y'all might have separate apartments. You might just be hanging out and, she shows you who she is. But when you're living with her, when you have to see her every day, yeah, it enhances. Marriage does not make it better. It enhances it. So what I'm saying, men, is that if you're in a dating relationship or if you are exclusive to that person, boyfriend or girlfriend, if you are unhappy, then you need to reevaluate. Because again, marriage does not make unhappiness happiness. Next thing I'll say is conversation lacks depth, which means that a lot of your feelings you can't really share with her. She doesn't take your feelings seriously. You're sharing your feelings with her and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind for her. So you have surface level conversations because you feel like you can't share your feelings because you feel like she doesn't take your feelings seriously. That's what lack of depth means. And so if you're in a situation where you really feel like you can't talk to her or you can't share your feelings or you can't be vulnerable, you got to keep your guard up. You got to be this macho man, then that might not be for you. You have to get to know somebody. You have to really have a desire to really want to get to know the person that you are spending time with and dating. And if you can't do that, then what's the point? If you want a surface level conversation, you can get that anywhere, you know? So I would say make sure that in your conversation, you guys go deep. You guys really get deep with each other, really, really get to know each other. The surface level stuff, that's just not going to be good in the long run. because you'll get into a marriage and then you'll still continue to have surface level conversations. You'll be like, man, you're my wife. Like, how come I can't share my feelings with you? How come I can't be vulnerable with you? Next thing I'll say is just always arguing. Like, y'all can't agree on the fundamental aspects of life, such as like finances and family. And, at the end of the day, if y'all can't agree on certain things, actually, I'll take that back. It's not the fact that y'all can't agree. It's the fact that, like, it's the basic fundamental things that y'all are just not aligned on. It's the things that, one of y'all could easily be like, you know what? This is the battle that I'm not going to fight. I'll let you have this one. But y'all argue about everything under the sun. Everything is a debate. Everything is an argument. Everything is back and forth. You're just going to be miserable because you'll never get to a point where you guys can agree on something, or somebody will just be like, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice and compromise on this one. I'm going to let you have this one. Cool. If both of you are out for your own selves, and you're being selfish and not selfless in everything, then that means you guys are not aligned. And if you're not aligned, I'm gonna tell you this: not being aligned will destroy a relationship. It'll kill it. It will destroy a relationship. The more and more it happens, the more and more you will become miserable. Alignment is key. Alignment is the building block and the foundation to where you'll know whether, you can marry someone or not. If you're not aligned, it ain't gonna work. Alignment is key. The next one is she belittles you, especially in public. As men, when we get belittled, it really affects our self-esteem and our confidence, because we already have to go out in the world and prove ourselves, right? We got to go out here, earn a living, make our mark on the world. It's tough. It's tough to go out in this world and do so as a man, especially as an African American man. So when you are in a situation where your significant other is belittling you or making it seem like you're not doing enough or you're not good enough, that will affect our self-esteem and self-confidence. And if our confidence and our self-esteem is affected, we are going to look for that in other places. We're going to look for other people to affirm us if we're not getting affirmation from our women. It's the way we're wired, right? We have to be confident in our abilities and ourselves, and the people that we're dating and the people that we're with are going to enhance that if they're truly for us. And it's going to be to a point where our women should be encouraging and motivating us to be out here, to go out here and to think that we can move a whole mountain because we have that affirmation. But if your woman's constantly belittling you, talking down on you, saying you ain't nothing and all this and all that, you for sure have to reevaluate that relationship, because when that starts to affect you, it's going to become a problem. And it's a problem that you really don't want. One of the things men pride themselves on is confidence and self-esteem, right? And when that's questioned, or I'm sorry, when that gets called into question, it just affects us mentally. And you don't want that. So if you're in that type of situation, you got to reevaluate that. And you got to reevaluate it quick, because it affects other things. It affects you as a man and as an individual. And it's just something that you don't want. We already got enough to deal with. And that's one of the things that we just don't need happening when we get home. Another red flag is, I think I just touched on this on the last one. I'm going to say it again. She doesn't support your goals or your vision or your aspirations, your dreams, what you're trying to do in life. She doesn't support it, then no, she's not it for you. And I'm not saying that, it should be a situation where you wake up one day and you say, I'm going to quit my job because I got this dream. And then she's just supposed to be like, oh, okay, yeah, quit your job. No, I'm not talking. I'm not talking about that. Because at the end of the day, you still got bills to pay. You still got a family to take care of. So it can't just be like, you can't just be like, well, I'm about to quit and then, I'm about to take a leap of faith. No, I'm talking about, let's say you're working, right? But you say, I want to go back to school. I want to get my degree in marketing because I want to be XYZ. That's a passion of mine. That's a goal of mine. That's a dream of mine. She's saying, nah, you don't need to be that. You shouldn't be that. Nah, you don't need to be going back to school. Nah, that's a waste of time. Just really being a negative Nancy about what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, when you evolve, she evolves. When you build up, she builds up. Y'all are trying to build something together. So when you rise to the top, she rises to the top, So if it's one of those things where she is not supporting that vision or that goal, then you might need to reevaluate, because it's like, well, what if God has purposed me for this? And here it is, you're trying to block that or get in the way of that blessing that could be coming from me being obedient. Then, that's something that you need to look into. Maybe you've prayed to God. God has given you a vision. He's given you confirmation that, yes, you should go after this. But yet you got her over here not supporting that. Then that could be a red flag. Only in situations where you've been given a confirmation. Like, again, just all of a sudden just quitting something and being like, you know what, I'm gonna go be a rapper. I mean, that's cool and all, but that's one of those careers where it's so saturated, and it's like, okay, so what are you gonna do in the meantime between you going to lay tracks in the studio? Like I said, bills still need to get paid. You still need to be earning a living. So what are you going to do in the meantime? Is it something where you just going to be laying tracks on the side while you're still working? With me and Destiny, when we started the content creation, we both were still working our 9 to 5s and doing content creation. At the end of the day, we still have responsibilities. And so I couldn't just up and be like, you know what, I want to be a YouTuber and I'm going to quit my full-time job. Now, for some people, it works. For some people, it works. But in a normal situation, it has to be some structure to it, right? It has to be, some type of plan or vision in the meantime while you are trying to reach that goal. So there's a difference, but just know in a normal situation, if you have a negative Nancy not supporting you, then that might not be it. Last thing I'll say is for the men, if she doesn't appreciate you or she takes you for granted, then that's one of those things where you also might have to reevaluate. And what I'm saying is this is all after having conversations with her. Like, right, this isn't just, well, you know what, she took me for granted in this situation, I'm gonna leave. No, you have to have a conversation first and be like, I feel like in this relationship, I'm being taken for granted. And then from there, you kind of see where the conversation flows, and then see if there's changes being made and adjustments before you kind of get to that level of, okay, nah, this ain't for me. So everything that I've been saying to you, to the man and to the woman, it's not just one time it happens and then boom, you leave. No, you gotta hang on. You gotta have conversations. You gotta talk to them, come to some type of common ground. And then from there, if it's not working out, maybe you've gotten counseling, maybe you've talked to other couples, you've used other older couples as a resource. And after all that is still not working out, then okay, at that point, then yeah, you can start reevaluating. But yeah, if she's taking you for granted, not appreciating your contributions, not appreciating you for who you are, then yeah, that's a red flag. A lot of times people get taken advantage of, and they wait and they wait and they continuously get taken advantage of and continuously get taken advantage of. And they use the other person's kindness for weakness. And again, it goes back to what I was saying. They get sucked dry. They get bled dry. You don't want to be in a relationship like that, because once you've given your all and you feel like you've been pouring into, but you haven't been poured into, and it's just been a one-way thing, then that affects you. That affects you for future relationships, because now you'll get into the next relationship and be like, you know what? How do I know this woman ain't going to do the same thing to me that the last woman did? And it's easy to get in that type of situation. So I would say you need to make sure that if you are feel like your contributions aren't being appreciated or you're being taken advantage of, have a conversation. And then from there, if it continues on, then you'll have to reevaluate. Woo. So I hope this was helpful. Like I said, I think it was just put on my heart to really talk about this, because these are flags that a lot of people ignore, and it just ends up just turning very bad very quick if these flags are not looked into or corrected or just ignored. And so, yeah, I hope this helps somebody. Just make sure that you are following us on IG, where we post reels from the episodes. And if you can't watch us, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast and Flip That Switch. But just make sure one way or the other, you are tapping in with us. Also, if you would like to be on an episode of Flip That Switch, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. I'm sure it could benefit others, and it would just be great to have a conversation with you. So that's something that you would like to do, please hit me in the comments. Let me know. And just want to thank y'all so much for tuning into this episode. And we're going to see you for the next episode. And we out. Peace.